In today's video, you're going to be learning about surface area and volume of cylinders and rectangular prisms. We're going to start off our notes by talking about the two definitions for surface and volume, or surface area and volume. Surface area is the sum of all surfaces or faces of a three-dimensional figure. Remember that sum is what we use when we're talking about addition, so you can just put a plus sign in parentheses there. Some keywords that go along with surface area are going to be cover, wrap, paint, surface, and square units. Our second definition we have is volume, and that's the amount of space occupied by a figure. It is the product of a figure's length, width, and height. And remember that product means we multiply. Some keywords with volume are listed on the right: fit, fill, space, hold, amount, inside, contain, and cubic units. So when you're dealing with the volume and surface area of the two shapes that I mentioned, rectangular prism and cylinder, you have specific formulas you're going to be using. We have the volume of a rectangular prism, which is going to look like this. A length, a width, and a height are going to be given to you, and you'll use the formula volume equals length times width times height. Just a reminder that when you have letters smushed up against each other like that, we are multiplying. So all those three dimensions, you would just multiply them together and you would get the volume for that rectangular prism. Now the volume for cylinder, we're going to have this circle on the top and the circle on the bottom, and it's holding all this space in between. So it's kind of like a can of soup. We would have the volume equals pi r squared times h. That's the height of your cylinder times that the top of that circle, so that pi times r squared. So here's r, that's your radius, and h is your height. Something to note is that, again, we're going to be multiplying here, pi times r squared times h. But just a reminder that when you think about PEMDAS, we have to look for parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. We have no parentheses in this formula, but we do have an exponent. That means you need to take care of doing that r squared first in each of these problems before you go ahead and multiply everything together. And then another note you want to make is that pi in all these problems, rather than using the pi button on our calculator, we're going to use the number 3.14. It's just an approximation of pi. Obviously we know it goes on forever, but to make our calculations so that we don't have so many decimals going on forever, we're just going to cut it off at 3.14 for estimation purposes. Our surface area formula for a rectangular prism, we have surface area equals 2 times the length times the width plus 2 times the length times the height plus 2 times the width times the height. This picture you see here of these rectangles kind of laid out in front of or next to each other is a net of a rectangular prism. That just means if you had built a rectangular prism maybe out of a piece of paper, if you were to unfold it, all those pieces would be put together in that way, and you would go ahead and fold them back on those lines to build the shape again. So our surface area comes from the 2 times the length times the width, so that's our length times our width on this rectangle, and there's 2 of those yellow rectangles. Then we have 2 times our length times our height. So length times height and length times height are going to get us the area of both of the pink rectangles. That's why we have 2. And then we have to find the area of each of these side rectangles. So you do your width times your height, and we have 2 of those. Those are the green ones. You add up all those things, and you're going to get all of the surface area. So all the outside, like the coverage of that block. If you were going to wrap a present, it would tell you how much paper you needed, or if you were going to paint the outside of it, you would know how much paint you needed. Moving on to the surface area of a cylinder, same idea, it's still surface area, so you're just trying to find what is covering the outside. So here we have the net of our cylinder, and this time we have surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. So with our surface area here, we have our area of both of these circles. Remember, the area of one circle is just pi r squared, and since there's 2 of them, we get the 2 pi r squared. And then we add that to the area of this then rectangle, which you would put together to make like the label of a can or something. That would be what the label would be. So that's your rectangle. The height of that is the height of the can, and then the length of it here is 2 pi r, because that's the distance around our circle. It equals the circumference of that circle, so that's where we get that 2 pi r from. So again, these are just the nets of it, just so you can see where these formulas are coming from. These formulas will be provided to you, so you don't need to worry about memorizing them. Go ahead and turn to the next page. On the top it says solving surface area and volume problems, rectangular prisms. Step 1 for this is you're going to look at the formula sheet and write the formula that you need. Step 2, you're going to replace the formula equation with the appropriate numbers. And step 3, you're going to solve and label with the correct unit of measure. So in this example, it says find the volume. We're dealing with a rectangular prism here, so our volume formula is volume equals length times width times height. We have the length is 10 here, the height of our rectangular prism is 5, and the width is 2. Step 2 says we replace each of those letters. So our V equals, we still don't know volume, so V equals comes down. Length is 10, width is 2, and height is 5. And remember, volume is the product, so we're going to be multiplying all of these together. Bring V down again. 10 times 2 is 20, and 20 times 5 is 100. So our volume equals 100, and this says volume is always labeled with cubed units. In this case, we're dealing with centimeters, so it's going to be centimeters cubed, and we use that little exponent 3 as that way of saying that these are three-dimensional units here. Go ahead and try the your turn problem, find the volume. So the first thing I want you to do is label each of the sides, the width, length, and the height, and then go ahead and fill in your formula and solve for the volume. Here's the work. Once you've tried it, you can check yours here. We have volume equals length times width times height. Our length is 7, our width is 1, and our height is 2. Multiply those all together and you get 14 inches cubed for this example. Now we have the example of the surface area of a rectangular prism. So you're going to need your surface area formula, and that's our longer one. We have SA equals 2 length times width plus 2 length times height plus 2 width times height. So this is our whole formula. You're going to go ahead and label your length is 10 here, the height is 5, and the width is 2. And then all we have to do is go and plug in all of those values where we see those letters. So SA equals 2 times our length is 10, the width is 2, plus 2 times our length again is 10, our height is 5, plus 2 times our width is 2 times the height of 5. That plugs in all of our values that we know, and now we can go ahead and solve this. So use your PEMDAS rules. We have to go with our multiplication first. So we're going to say 2 times 10 is 20, times 2 is 40, plus 2 times 10 is 20, 20 times 5, 100, plus 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 5 is 20. That gets us each of those things multiplied, and now we can just add everything together. And our surface area for this rectangular prism is 160. And we're talking about area this time, so we're going to use millimeters squared. We use squared units or units squared for our area problems, and that is used, we use the little exponent of 2 here. Instead of cubed units, we're talking about square units this time. Go ahead and pause the video and try the your turn problem by yourself. Okay, hopefully you took a minute to try that by yourself. Again, we're using the surface area formula SA equals 2 length times width plus 2 length times height plus 2 width times height. We plug in our values. Our height is 2, the length is 7, and the width is 1. Remember, you start with your multiplication first. We end up with 14 plus 28 plus 4, and the last step is to add all of those pieces together, and that ends up getting us 46 feet squared for the surface area of this rectangular prism. Moving on to the top of our next page, it says solving surface area and volume problems for cylinders this time. Step 1 is still going to be to look at your formula sheet, write down the formula you need. Step 2, replace the formula equation with the appropriate numbers. And step 3, solve and label with the correct unit of measure. So here we're going to be finding the volume of this cylinder. The formula for volume of a cylinder is volume equals pi r squared h. Our volume here, we don't know it. We bring that down. Remember, we said that pi is always going to be 3.14 for this unit. We're going to just approximate with that. So we replace pi with 3.14. We're multiplying by r squared. Our radius here is 4, and we're going to square it. And then we have to multiply by the height, which is 12, and that's right in our picture labeled there for us. Then, remember we talked about PEMDAS, E comes before M, so our exponents come before multiplication. So we have to do 4 squared before we can do anything else. That means we bring down 3.14 times 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to replace 4 squared with 16 and then multiply by 12. And at this point, then you can type the rest of that into your calculator, just multiply everything together. And for this volume, we're going to get 602.88 centimeters cubed. Go ahead and pause the video, finish writing that one down, and then go ahead and try the second one, the your turn, by yourself. Hopefully you paused the video and tried this problem by yourself. You have to use the volume equals pi r squared formula again for this example. We replace pi with 3.14. We're multiplying by r squared, which is our radius squared, 15 squared in this example, times our height of 13. Remember, exponents come before multiplication when we talk about the order of operations. So 15 squared happens first, and 15 squared is 225. So I went and replaced that on this line right here. And then you just go ahead and multiply each of those things together, and you should get 9,184.5 inches cubed. In our last example, it asked us to find the surface area, and this time we're finding surface area of a cylinder. So surface area of a cylinder, remember, is 2 pi r squared. That's the two circles, the top and the bottom, plus 2 pi r h, that's like the edge around it, like the label of the soup can would be. So we have surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. Height again is 12 and our radius is 4. So we go ahead and we replace everything that we know. 2 times pi is 3.14 times our radius squared is 4 squared plus 2 times 3.14 times 4 times our height is 12. That replaces all of our variables with numbers, so we can go ahead and solve this. Remember, exponents come before multiplication. So we do 2 times 3.14 times 4 squared is 16 here. And then if you want to go ahead and multiply this stuff together, we're going to get 301.44. I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite this step down. Now we can multiply this part and this part. 2 times 3.14 times 16 gets us 100.48. The second part after the addition sign, this 2 times 3.14 times 4 times 12 is 301.44. That's our surface area, but we're not quite done. The last thing we have to do is add those two together. And when you do that, you get 401.92. And remember, that's feet squared for your area. Go ahead and pause the video and try the example the your turn problem by yourself. So here's the last your turn problem. Hopefully you took a minute to pause that. Surface area again is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h, and then you replace your radius as 15 inches, your height is 13 inches, and pi as 3.14. That gets us our step 2. To get to that line beneath step 2, we need to include, we have to do 15 squared first. That's our exponent. That gets us 225. Once we do that, we can multiply. That gets us 1,413 plus 1,224.6. Last step is just to add those two numbers together, and we get 2,637.6 inches squared. Again, we're talking about area, so we need those square units. Go ahead and back through the video if you need to catch up on any of the problems, and then the following page are practice problems for you to give a try on your own. Thanks for watching.